Yeah, another one is needed. That English taint that spreads through all former colonies that haven't themselves become republics and cast off that original libel law is a serious problem in the developing world. And so these problems in the UK are not just in the UK, and it's not just libel terrorism. They actually set precedents that are used in all Commonwealth countries or even former Commonwealth countries. And I'd like to follow up on the vibrancy of the third world press. It's true. I mean, where I'm in Kenya a lot of the time, I mean, my colleagues at the Standard, which is one of the two big newspapers, they're being raided by the police. The investigative head there, when he does a good story, he files it and he goes to Tanzania. and he just sits it out. I mean, okay, let's see what it's like. Okay, yeah, it's safe to come back now in a week's time. And he's been to jail half a day several times. But I mean, half a day is just something to put on your CV, right? So my question is, to you, why aren't you in jail for half a day? Are you perhaps not pushing the envelope enough? I mean, you don't want to be a martyr, but you should at least push it to get that thing on your CV.
Oh, I can show you mine. And we're more than a few half-a-days. Josh. He's one, by the way. He's got one on his CV, too.
Going back to the first question that Brother Jones posed, I clearly the site is in this fundraising mode. There's some limited options. But when it was first launched, there was this element that was an unmediated forum, that you could leak anything that was a document, and it would end up on this site. I could go to whether there was a standard curation process. There was some very specific limitations, a non-public document, and I think of importance or something like that. There's numerous reporting that says that due to criticisms that people could leak things that shouldn't be leaked, that the process has changed. Now there's a review process to decide what should be posted to the site. I haven't been able to verify whether or not that's true, but if you have shifted to that, what are you doing to ensure that as an activist organization, you're not holding back documents that would undermine ideology?
So well, let me just, for a moment. So the question is, by beginning to mediate, that is, edit or mediate or consider the documents that they do release on WikiLeaks and how they release it, as an activist organization, admitted activist organization, how do they stop themselves from being, let's say, subjective about what they will provide to the public?
Let me just pick on this activist organization. When we make clear what type of activist organization we are, that is a freedom of information activist organization. So this shouldn't be used, which has been used recently in the right-wing press, to try and suggest we're a left-wing activist organization or some other kind of activist organization. Okay, so initially we had the idea that because there's such a vast amount of material that we knew would be coming in and that we already had, that we could just put that there and then the world would go through it and comment and analyze it, and kind of the good stuff would bubble up, right? And the bad stuff would be noted and taken down, or sort of voted down or described as being irrelevant. But we always wanted to lead by example. And so we started making initial examples, good stuff, good commentary, good analysis, to try and foster that sort of climate. And but we never got to the stage where we didn't assess everything. And it became very clear when we were releasing extremely significant material that we knew for sure that was true, but we were getting comments from some guy in suburban Texas sitting at home, 14-year-old, going, oh, that's not true, that's clearly fake because of da-da-da-da-da. But the good drives out, the bad drives out the good. And you can't actually stick everything on one side in some sort of unfiltered way because the noise from the crap drives out the good material and reduces its political impact. So very quickly we saw that we couldn't do that, that we actually, that the general population was not able to assess things properly. So we had to have some kind of internal accreditation assessment. But this thing that you quote as widely reported, this is actually just some sentence that someone put into our Wikipedia page and is not at all true and was never true.
Wikipedia is not accurate.
Yeah, was never true, and we have never had a policy about restricting things because of indiscriminate leaking. And we have a very clear editorial criteria. And I ask, actually, how many organizations here do have an editorial criteria that is public? And our criteria is that the information must have been withheld from the public, currently withheld from the public, or undergoing active censorship attack in a legal sense, and be of significant public, ethical, historical, or diplomatic interest. That's the criteria. And one more thing, it can't be self-authored unless it's an official document. So very simple and clear. And that means sources have confidence when they approach us that we're not going to sit it in a drawer and just leave it there forever and wait until the market opportunity is right, or we won't give a damn, or we have some ideological agenda. Regardless of what nation they are from, they can have confidence that we will stick religiously to this editorial criteria. And if there's any doubt as to whether something is in or out, it's in.
You're moving to Iceland, I take it. Susan Reber. The question is what advice he has on protecting sources, because so many people just simply use email and reveal their identity by doing that. So
on the one hand, I can say you're all screwed. You are all totally screwed, because everything is going onto the internet. I was with, I won't name him, but one of the most respected investigative journalists in the United States. And he checked his email in Gmail, was logged into Google, and then he goes and starts searching stuff. Well, he's still logged into Google, so you saw his name in his Google searches. And Google keeps a history of everything being searched for. And then he was searching for things on the story he was developing, and he's a national security reporter. I mean, you're just screwed. I mean, the amount of information that is being collected on everything that is done, and it's just impossible to work and communicate in a normal way unless you have technical specialists dedicated to do this for you, means that your information trails and your sources' information trails are just everywhere. However, actually, the chance of a source being busted is very, very low, even with that developing problem. If someone actually has the energy and inclination and the career interest to do that, they can. But the chance is very, very low that a source will be busted.
In Washington, with an employee of the National Security Agency.
Yeah, right. But this is a country of 300 million people. So how many sources get publicly at least busted a year? What is it, 10 in the United States? 300 million people. So it's actually nothing. I mean, the chance of your source getting run over by a car are vastly higher. And now I've been caught. But there's a perceptual illusion, because every time a source is caught, their name is, even their face is in the paper. But every time the New York Times uses a source to inform a story, it's like the source never existed in the first place, because it's basically an anarchist act, right? Leaking is basically an anarchist act, and to be a mainstream publication, you can't be lionizing sources doing anarchist acts all the time. So you don't see the source mentioned at all in the story, or you see Document C by the New York Times, or you see an official speaking anonymously. But that's such a small reference that people don't see the source. So there's a perceptual bias that sources are getting busted all over, but there's not the perceptual understanding that sources are succeeding all over, and that the actual chance of being busted is extremely low, even in this incredibly aggressive environment.
I might disagree and say that sources can also, and leaking can also be a manipulative act, And with that, I wanted to ask again, Chuck, you're now emerged in a university. Why? I mean, I know why I wound up here. Why did you wind up there?
Yikes. You know, that's a therapy type question. We had 250 to 300 interns at the center when I ran it for 15 years, and I do like the mentoring part of it. And we're going to have, by the fall, 5 professors who will be directly working with students, and I think a third of our full-time staff just graduated from America. So we don't want investigative reporting to become hieroglyphics, and we are truly, as is happening here, there are 8 university-based centers in the United States, not counting the Innocence Projects, of which there are more than 50 in the United States. So I think that is an important component of everything we say. If we can break important stories and teach a new generation, and also, in the case of the workshop, look at new models, it's hard to find the downside. I mean, and then we forget that when NPR began 40 years ago, 70%, or I think it was 80%, of the public radio stations individually in America were at universities. So there is this immense infrastructure of people, of plant and equipment, libraries, and, oh yes, young people who are eager to learn and are quite bright and represent the future. And so if you put it all together as a package, it's actually very exciting. So the key is to not get hung up in the institutional administrative hell that, I'm not an we both quit CBS, and I'm not a big institutional guy, okay? So I'm still getting used to that part. Yeah.
Let me repeat the question. The question is, she's heard how hard it is from Gavin to set up in England and the liabilities, and then this safe haven that's being created potentially in Iceland. How simple is it to actually do it? Do you have to actually move to Iceland? I think we went through